Rain fell on the metal roofs of Solace Station, and nobody on the colony thought much about it. Farmers checked their crops under domed greenhouses. Children ran through narrow hallways between homes built from old cargo containers. Nobody looked at the sky because nobody expected anything to come from it. Then the alarm started. Colonel David Hale was fixing a broken water pump when the sound hit his ears. He dropped his tools and ran to the control room, where a young technician named Ruth pointed at the main screen with a shaking hand. Dozens of strange shapes had appeared above the planet. They were not human ships. Their hulls were sharp and curved, like blades stitched together. "Alien fleet," Ruth said. "They just appeared out of nowhere." Hale did not panic. He had trained for this moment for years, even though he never truly believed it would come. He opened a locked drawer under his desk and pulled out a small device wrapped in cloth. It was old, built decades ago, kept ready in case the worst happened again. He pressed the button. A single message shot out into space, aimed toward Earth. The message was short: "Contact confirmed. Requesting fleet response, Protocol Ember 0." Above the planet, the alien fleet commander watched the small human colony with mild interest. His name was Keswick, and he served the Drathan Dominion, a power that had ruled space far longer than humans had built their first rocket. Keswick had read reports about humans. The reports called them weak, divided, and easy to conquer. He believed every word. "Send the surrender message," Keswick told his second officer, a thin alien named Oren. "Give them 1 hour. If they refuse, we begin the landing." Down on the surface, Hale gathered his people. Solace Station was not a military base. It held only 200 colonists, most of them farmers, engineers, and scientists. But hidden beneath the greenhouses was something the Dominion did not know about. A small armory built during the colony's founding, filled with weapons and armor that had never been used. "We are not going to win this fight alone," Hale told his people. "But we don't need to win. We only need to survive long enough for help to arrive." Ruth frowned. "What help? Nobody even lives close to us." Hale looked at the old device still in his hand. "You'd be surprised." At that moment, on Earth, deep inside a mountain range that had once been empty wilderness, an alarm rang through a hidden command center. Admiral Grace Coleman was asleep when her communicator buzzed against the table beside her bed. She sat up instantly, already reaching for her uniform before her eyes were fully open. The message on her screen made her stomach tighten. Protocol Ember 0 had not been triggered in 30 years. It meant only one thing: humanity was under attack again, and this time they were ready. Coleman walked briskly through the halls of the command center, passing rows of sleeping officers who would soon wake to the same alarm. She reached a large door marked with a symbol shaped like a rising sun over a shield. Behind that door was something the rest of the galaxy did not know existed. She placed her hand on a scanner. The door opened, revealing a massive control room filled with screens showing shipyards hidden far beyond Pluto's orbit. Thousands of ships sat waiting in the darkness, built quietly over 3 decades, ever since humanity's first and only brush with alien war nearly destroyed the species. "Wake the fleet," Coleman said, "all of it." Back on Solace Station, the Dominion's message arrived exactly as promised. A cold, mechanical voice spoke through every communicator on the colony. "This world now belongs to the Drathan Dominion. Surrender within 1 hour or be removed." Hale looked at his people. Fear was on some faces, but not all. Many of them had grown up hearing stories about the First War, about the day humanity almost lost everything. They had waited their whole lives for this test. "We're not surrendering," Hale said. "We're stalling." He gave orders, and the colonists moved quickly, setting traps along the pathways leading toward the greenhouses, hiding weapons under loose floor panels, and preparing defensive positions in the tunnels beneath the colony. It was not much, but it was something. Above them, Keswick's fleet began to descend, confident that this would be an easy victory. Keswick did not know about Protocol Ember Zero. He did not know about the hidden shipyards beyond Pluto. He only knew what his reports told him, and his reports were wrong. As the first Dominion landing craft entered the atmosphere, a single thought crossed Keswick's mind, though he pushed it away as unimportant. The human signal that had been sent into space a few minutes earlier had a strange pattern to it, unlike anything in the Dominion's records. He should have paid more attention. Far beyond the edge of the system, deep in the black of space, something enormous had already begun to move. A low hum filled the shipyards beyond Pluto as thousands of ships woke from decades of silence. Lights flickered on inside dark holes one by one, like stars appearing in a night sky. For 30 years, these vessels had waited in secret, built piece by piece, hidden from every eye in the galaxy. Now, for the first time, their engines came alive. Admiral Grace Coleman stood in the main control room, watching the numbers rise on her screen. Ship after ship reported ready. She had spent half her life preparing for this exact moment, ever since she was a young officer who survived humanity's first contact with hostile aliens. That war had almost ended humanity before it truly began. She had promised herself it would never happen again. "Fleet status?" she asked. An officer beside her answered quickly. 94% ready, Admiral. The rest will be online within the hour." Coleman nodded. "We don't have an hour. Solace Station does not have an hour." She turned to a large map of the galaxy, where a small blinking light marked the location of the colony under attack. It was far away, farther than any fleet had ever traveled in such a short time. But humanity had prepared for that too. "Activate the long jump drive," Coleman ordered. "All ships synchronize." The long jump drive was humanity's best-kept secret, a technology built from lessons learned after the First War, when human ships were too slow to defend their own worlds. It allowed a fleet to cross vast distances in a fraction of the time other species believed possible. No alien government knew it existed. While the fleet prepared to jump, Coleman thought about Colonel Hale, a man she trained with many years ago. She trusted him to hold the line, but she also knew that trust alone could not stop an alien invasion. Speed was everything now. Meanwhile, on Solace Station, the ground battle had already begun. Dominion landing craft touched down near the greenhouses, and armored soldiers marched out in tight formation, expecting no resistance. Instead, hidden traps triggered along the pathways, collapsing sections of ground beneath their feet and releasing clouds of thick smoke that blinded their sensors. Hale watched from a hidden position as the first wave of Dominion soldiers stumbled through the chaos. He raised his hand, signaling his people to hold their fire until the enemy was close enough. "Wait," he whispered, "wait." When the Dominion soldiers reached the narrow tunnel entrance, human defenders opened fire from multiple angles. The tunnels, built originally for storage, had become a deadly maze. Dominion soldiers, trained for open battlefields, struggled to adapt to the tight, twisting space. Keswick, watching the battle from orbit, felt his patience thinning. He had expected total victory within minutes. Instead, reports of casualties kept arriving on his screen. "They fight like they know something we don't," Oren said nervously. Keswick dismissed the comment. "They are farmers with old weapons. Send the second wave and prepare an orbital strike as backup." On the ground, Hale received word that the human forces had suffered losses too. A young defender named Peter had been wounded during the tunnel fight, and the colony's small medical team worked quickly to save him. Hale felt the weight of every decision pressing on his shoulders, but there was no time to slow down. "They'll send more soldiers," Hale told Ruth. "We hold as long as we can." Ruth checked a small scanner. "The signal you sent, has there been any response?" Hale did not answer right away. He did not know if help would arrive in time, or if it would arrive at all. All he could do was trust the plan that had been built long before he was born. Above the planet, Keswick ordered a second, larger wave of soldiers to land, along with heavier weapons designed to break through fortified positions. The Dominion's confidence had cracked slightly, but not enough to change their strategy. They still believed total victory was only a matter of time. Far beyond the system's edge, space began to ripple. A single flash of light appeared, then multiplied rapidly, spreading like a wave across the darkness. Ships began to emerge from nothing, first a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Aboard the lead ship, Coleman watched her monitors carefully as the fleet completed its jump. The vast formation of human vessels now floated silently at the edge of the system, still too far to be detected by Dominion sensors. "Distance to Solace Station?" Coleman asked. 12 minutes at full speed, Admiral." Coleman took a deep breath. 12 minutes could mean the difference between victory and loss for the people on the ground. She gave the order without hesitation. "Full speed ahead, no more waiting." The human fleet surged forward, cutting through space toward the small colony that had held the line long enough for help to arrive. On Solace Station, Hale continued fighting, unaware that above him, an army built from decades of quiet preparation was finally coming home to answer humanity's call. Smoke filled the tunnels beneath Solace Station, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the narrow passages like thunder trapped underground. What had once been simple storage corridors had turned into a battlefield, and both sides were paying a heavy price for every meter of ground. Colonel David Hale moved through the chaos with practiced calm, guiding his people from position to position. He had lost track of how long the fighting had gone on, but he knew it had been longer than the Dominion expected. That alone gave him hope. A defender named Peter, still recovering from his earlier wound, limped beside Hale carrying extra ammunition. "They keep sending more," Peter said. "How long can we hold?" "As long as we have to," Hale replied. Above the planet, Keswick watched the battle unfold with growing frustration. His soldiers had trained for open warfare across flat battlefields, not narrow tunnels filled with traps and unpredictable defenders. Reports of Dominion casualties climbed higher than any battle he had fought in years. "This is unacceptable," Keswick said, his voice sharp. "Order and Orbital strike on their central hub. End this now." Orin hesitated. "Overlord Keswick, an Orbital strike this close to our own ground forces carries risk." "I don't care about risk," Keswick snapped. "I care about results." The order was given, and far above the colony, a Dominion warship prepared its weapons for a direct strike on Solace Station's central hub, the heart of the colony's defense system. If the hub fell, the tunnels below would lose power, lights, and communication, leaving the defenders blind and vulnerable. Inside the hub, Ruth monitored the incoming threat on her scanner. Her eyes widened as she detected a massive buildup of energy above the planet. "Colonel, they're targeting us directly. Orbital weapon charging." Hale's stomach tightened. There was no way to stop an attack from space, not with the weapons they had. All he could do was warn his people and hope the hub's reinforced walls would hold. "Everyone brace for impact," Hale shouted through the comm system. Seconds passed like hours. The entire colony seemed to hold its breath. Then, just as the Dominion warship prepared to fire, its sensors picked up something unexpected. A wave of new contacts appeared at the edge of the system, moving faster than anything the Dominion had ever tracked before. Keswick's second officer stared at the screen in disbelief. "Overlord, we have a problem." Keswick turned sharply. "What kind of problem?" "Ships," Orin said, his voice trembling slightly. "Hundreds of them, maybe more. They're not ours, and they're not registered in any database we have." Keswick stepped closer to the screen, watching as the numbers continued climbing. What began as a few dozen contacts grew into hundreds within seconds, then continued rising steadily. The formation was too organized, too precise, to be anything but a military fleet. "That can't be one fleet," Orin whispered. Keswick felt something he had not felt in a long time: uncertainty. He had led military campaigns across dozens of worlds, crushing resistance wherever the Dominion expanded, but nothing in his experience matched what he was seeing now. "Cancel the orbital strike," Keswick ordered suddenly. "Redirect all defensive systems toward those new contacts." Down in the tunnels, Hale received word from Ruth that the orbital strike had been canceled. Confusion spread among the defenders, unsure why the enemy had suddenly changed strategy. Hale, however, felt a flicker of realization. "They spotted something," he said quietly. Ruth checked her scanner again and her breath caught. "Colonel, there's a fleet approaching. A massive one, it's not Dominion." Hale allowed himself the smallest smile, the first since the battle began. "That's ours." Above the planet, the human fleet continued its approach, growing larger and more visible with every passing second. Keswick's officers scrambled to prepare a defensive formation, but confusion and disbelief slowed their response. No intelligence report had ever suggested humanity possessed a fleet of this size, let alone the technology to arrive so quickly. Keswick stared at the screen, his earlier confidence replaced by a growing sense of dread. The reports had been wrong. Humanity was not weak, nor primitive, nor easily conquered. "Sound full alert," Keswick ordered, his voice tighter than before. "Prepare for engagement." As alarms rang through every Dominion ship in orbit, the massive human fleet closed the final distance, ready to answer the call for help that had traveled across the stars. On the ground, Hale gathered his remaining defenders, watching the sky with quiet determination, knowing that the battle above was about to change everything. Space around Solace Station lit up as the human fleet dropped out of its final jump, filling the darkness with rows of gleaming ships stretching farther than any sensor could measure at once. What had been empty space only moments ago now held a wall of vessels, arranged with a precision that made the Dominion's own formation look scattered by comparison. Aboard the lead ship, the Horizon's Edge, Admiral Grace Coleman watched the battlefield unfold on her main screen. Solace Station sat below, surrounded by Dominion warships still adjusting their positions after the sudden appearance of the human fleet. "Status of the colony?" Coleman asked. An officer replied quickly. "Ground forces still holding, Admiral. Colonel Hale's team has taken losses but remains active." Coleman's jaw tightened. "Then let's make sure they don't take any more." She gave the order, and the human fleet surged forward in a coordinated wave. Unlike traditional battle formations, human ships moved in flexible patterns, breaking apart and regrouping based on real-time data shared instantly across the fleet. It was a style of warfare built from decades of study, testing, and painful lessons learned from humanity's first encounter with hostile aliens. Keswick watched the approaching fleet with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Concentrate fire on their center formation," he ordered. "Break their line." Dominion warships opened fire, sending bright energy blasts across the void. Several human ships took direct hits, their shields flashing under the impact, but none of them broke formation. Instead, they adjusted instantly, spreading out just enough to avoid a second volley while returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. Oren stared at his screen in confusion. "Overlord, their ships are reacting faster than our targeting systems can adjust." Keswick clenched his fists. "Then adjust faster." The Dominion fleet, built on a doctrine of overwhelming force and rigid formations, struggled to match the human fleet's constant movement. Small groups of human ships darted between larger vessels, releasing swarms of automated drones that struck weak points in Dominion shields before retreating just as quickly. Down on the surface, Hale watched streaks of light flash across the sky as the battle raged above. Ruth stood beside him, eyes fixed on a small tactical screen showing a simplified version of the fleet engagement. "They're not just bigger," Ruth said, amazed. "They're smarter." Hale allowed himself a brief moment of pride. "That's the idea." In orbit, one of Keswick's largest warships attempted to break through the human formation using brute force, pushing directly toward the center of the fleet. Coleman noticed the maneuver immediately. "They're trying to split us," she said. "Let them try." She ordered a group of smaller human ships to fall back, creating a gap that appeared to open a path straight toward the horizon's edge. The Dominion warship surged forward eagerly, sensing an opportunity to strike the human flagship directly. It was a trap. As the Dominion ship entered the gap, human vessels from both sides closed in instantly, surrounding it in a tight formation. Concentrated fire tore through its weakened shields, disabling its weapon systems within seconds. The warship, once a symbol of Dominion strength, drifted helplessly, unable to continue the fight. Keswick watched the loss unfold on his screen, his confidence crumbling further with each passing moment. He had commanded fleets for decades, yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for an enemy that adapted this quickly. "Pull back the damaged ships," Keswick ordered, his voice strained. "Regroup at the rear formation." But retreating proved more difficult than expected. Human ships maintained constant pressure, cutting off escape routes and forcing Dominion vessels into disorganized retreats. What had begun as a confident invasion was quickly turning into a desperate struggle for survival. Coleman watched the battle shift in humanity's favor, but she knew the fight was far from over. Keswick still commanded a significant portion of his fleet, and desperation could make an enemy more dangerous, not less. "Keep the pressure on," she ordered, "but stay alert. Cornered enemies don't fight fair." As the battle continued, both sides began to understand the true scale of what was happening. This was not a simple invasion of a small colony. It was the first real test between two civilizations, one built on ancient conquest and the other forged from decades of quiet preparation and hard-earned lessons. Below on Solace Station, Hale received updated reports from orbit. The tide had turned, but the fight for the colony and for humanity's place among the stars was only beginning to reach its final stage. Sparks flew across the tunnels beneath Solace Station as the last group of Dominion soldiers retreated toward their landing craft, chased by human defenders who had fought for hours without rest. Colonel David Hale moved through the smoke-filled corridors, checking on his people as the ground battle finally began to quiet down. "They're pulling out," Ruth reported, watching her scanner closely. "Ground forces are retreating to orbit." Hale allowed himself a brief breath of relief, though he knew the larger battle above the planet was still far from finished. He gathered a small team and moved toward the surface, wanting to see the sky with his own eyes rather than through a screen. Above the planet, the battle had reached its final and most dangerous stage. Admiral Grace Coleman studied the shifting positions of the remaining Dominion ships, searching for the exact location of their commander. She had learned long ago that removing an enemy's leadership often ended a battle faster than destroying every ship in their fleet. "Confirm the location of the Dominion flagship," she ordered. An officer responded quickly. "Tracking now, Admiral. They're attempting to retreat through the northern debris field." Coleman studied the map. The debris field, filled with wreckage from the earlier fighting, created a natural maze that could slow down a fleeing ship. It also created the perfect opportunity for an ambush. "Send 3 squadrons to cut off their escape route," she ordered. "Quietly. I don't want them to see us coming until it's too late." Aboard his flagship, Keswick watched his surviving ships scatter, each one searching for a way out of the system. He had lost more than half his fleet in a matter of hours, a defeat unlike anything the Dominion had suffered in generations. Pride kept him from ordering a full surrender, but deep down, he understood the battle was already lost. "Overlord, we're approaching the debris field," Oren said. "It should provide cover for our retreat." Keswick nodded, though his hands remained tense at his console. "Proceed carefully. I don't trust anything about this fight anymore." His caution proved justified. As his flagship entered the debris field, human squadrons emerged from hidden positions among the wreckage, surrounding the Dominion ship before it had any chance to react. Weapons fire tore through its outer defenses, disabling engines and weapon systems within moments. Keswick gripped his console as alarms blared throughout his ship. Return fire, all weapons. But it was too late. The Dominion flagship, now crippled and surrounded, had no path left for escape. Coleman's voice came through on an open channel, calm but firm. Your fleet is defeated. Continued resistance will only cost more lives. Stand down. Keswick stared at the screen, his pride battling against the reality in front of him. For a moment, he considered a final, desperate move, a self-destruct sequence that would take at least one human ship down with him. His hand hovered over the controls. Before he could act, a small boarding craft launched from a nearby human vessel, cutting through the debris field with practiced precision. Inside, Colonel Hale sat strapped into his seat, having volunteered personally for this mission the moment he learned the Dominion flagship had been cornered. "You'd rather die than surrender," Hale muttered to himself. "Not going to let that happen." The boarding craft docked roughly against the damaged hull, and Hale led a small team through a breach in the ship's side. They moved quickly through disabled corridors, guided by data shared from the human fleet, until they reached the bridge just as Keswick prepared to activate the self-destruct sequence. "Don't," Hale said firmly, weapon raised but steady. "It ends here one way or another, your choice." Keswick looked at the human standing before him, someone from a species his own government had dismissed as weak and unworthy of serious concern. For the first time, he saw not weakness, but quiet, unshakable resolve. Slowly, Keswick lowered his hand from the controls. Word spread quickly across the remaining Dominion ships that their overlord had been captured, not killed. Confusion turned to hesitation, and hesitation turned to surrender. One by one, Dominion vessels began powering down their weapons, signaling their intent to stand down. Above Solace Station, the battle that had begun with an alien invasion ended not with total destruction, but with humanity's quiet strength finally revealed to the galaxy. Hale escorted Keswick off the flagship, unaware that this single decision would shape how humanity was seen by every power watching from the shadows of space. Dust still settled over the broken greenhouses of Solace Station when the first rays of morning light returned to the colony. The fighting had ended hours ago, but the marks it left behind would remain for a long time. Burned soil, collapsed tunnels, and quiet moments of grief mixed with relief filled the small colony as its people began to process what had happened. Colonel David Hale walked slowly through the wreckage, taking note of the damage without saying much. Ruth followed close behind, carrying a data pad filled with reports from the night's events. Around them, colonists worked together to clear debris, comfort the injured, and begin the slow process of rebuilding. "We lost 11 people," Ruth said quietly. "It could have been much worse." Hale nodded, his expression heavy but steady. "It could have been everyone." Above the planet, the human fleet remained in orbit, standing guard while repair teams moved between damaged ships. Admiral Grace Coleman stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the aftermath of the battle with a mixture of relief and quiet caution. Victory had come at a cost, but it had come. In a secured section of the flagship, Overlord Keswick sat under guard, stripped of his weapons but treated without cruelty. Coleman entered the room, studying him carefully before speaking. "You expected us to be weak," she said. Keswick did not deny it. "Our reports were wrong." "Reports usually are," Coleman replied, "when they're built on assumptions instead of understanding." She explained the terms humanity intended to offer, not out of mercy alone, but out of calculated strategy. Keswick and his surviving officers would be returned to Dominion territory, along with a clear message. Humanity was not a target for easy conquest, and any future conflict would come at a heavy price. Coleman chose restraint over cruelty, understanding that how humanity responded now would shape how the rest of the galaxy viewed them for generations to come. Keswick studied her carefully. Why show mercy to an enemy who tried to destroy your people? Coleman met his gaze without hesitation. Because strength isn't just about winning battles, it's about proving we didn't need to become monsters to do it. Back on the surface, word of the fleet's decision spread quickly among the colonists. Some were angry, believing the Dominion deserved harsher punishment after everything they had done. Others understood the deeper reasoning behind Coleman's choice, recognizing that humanity's actions now would speak louder than any weapon ever could. Hale gathered his people near the damaged central hub as repair crews worked around them. He looked out at the survivors, farmers and engineers who had become soldiers overnight, and felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. "We didn't ask for this fight," Hale said, addressing his people. "But when it came, we didn't run. We held the line until help arrived, and because of that, this colony still stands." A quiet murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Many of them had lost friends, homes, and a sense of safety they once took for granted. But they had also gained something else, proof that humanity's decades of quiet preparation had not been wasted. Elsewhere in the galaxy, word of the battle at Solace Station spread faster than anyone expected. Other alien governments, long unaware of humanity's true strength, began reviewing old reports with newfound concern. A species once dismissed as primitive had defeated a Dominion invasion fleet, captured its commander, and chosen restraint over revenge, a combination few had expected from any civilization, let alone one so young. In quiet meeting rooms across distant star systems, alien leaders discussed the implications of what had happened. Some saw humanity as a potential threat, others saw an opportunity for alliance. All of them agreed on one thing: humanity could no longer be ignored. Back on Solace Station, as repairs continued and life slowly returned to a new kind of normal, Hale stood outside the central hub, watching the human fleet still positioned protectively above the planet. Ruth joined him, looking up at the same sky that had once brought fear, now bringing a strange sense of quiet reassurance. "Do you think this is over?" Ruth asked. Hale watched the stars for a long moment before answering. "No, I think this is just the beginning." Far above them, the fleet remained steady, a silent reminder that humanity, once thought weak and unprepared, had finally stepped into the wider galaxy, not as prey, but as a power the stars themselves would remember.